right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this industry student engagement session, a key part of the State of Innovations Challenge. My name is Jenny, and I'm on the team leading the challenge, and I'm here today with Deirdre Quarnstrom, who's the general manager of Minecraft Atlas, and Moncivais, who's a development lead for Minecraft Education. So we are recording this webinar, but if you're here live, feel free to submit any questions through the chat throughout. And when we reach a nice pausing point, I'll sort of elevate those into the conversation. So I guess to kick us off, it would be great to hear from each of you a little bit more about what it means to be in your role, what your title means, because there's some big titles. Maybe Deirdre, do you want to start us off?
Sure, I can start. I like to tell people I have the best job in the world because I get to work with amazing people and in a lot of areas that are really important to me. So I kind of work at the intersection of technology, which is so amazing to be working with people who are thinking about what's next and solving really hard problems with technology, at education, which is so important to all of us. We've all had some kind of education. I meet so many people who tell me about educators in their lives. They might have a parent or a grandparent or someone close to them that's a teacher. And so education is really important to them. And then gaming and entertainment, which is so much fun. So we have this really just incredible opportunity to spend some time in each of those worlds and solve really hard problems. In the last year, we've done a lot, both to support the move to remote learning, bringing Minecraft into classrooms with remote learning, and also to address some of the topics that are so important around social justice and racial inequity.
Awesome. And what about you, Hera?
That's really funny because I think I have the best job in the world.
For
a lot of the same reasons Deirdre just said. So I'm a developer lead in Deirdre's team, and I lead a team of engineers that builds the Minecraft education client that so many students around the world use to learn using Minecraft in the classroom. And I just think that's amazing. So I'm a big fan of education. Education is why I'm here as a programmer and a software engineer. I think everybody in the world should absolutely learn how to code. It's an incredible tool and you can use it in any industry. It doesn't matter what you want to go into. You don't have to become a software engineer, but I think everybody should learn how to code. And I think this team, it's one of our missions to help improve access to coding education, as well as so many other subjects that you can learn with Minecraft. And so that's why I'm very excited to be part of the team.
Awesome, thank you both. And so for our time today, we're going to learn a little bit more about each of your day-to-days. I know there isn't probably a typical day, but you'll take us through a day and maybe how that's changed since COVID happened. Because for so many of us as learners and as workers, life looks very different day to day. We also want to learn about the pathway to your position. A lot of the folks participating in the challenge are middle schoolers, high schoolers, and out-of-school youth. So we'd love to hear more about sort of the early signs that you were interested in the world that you ended up in. And then we'll wrap up our hour with asking for your advice on how you would approach some of our case challenges so that as students are working through the case challenge prompts, they can have some expert advice, expert perspective to sort of flavor the solutions that they're coming up with. So circling back to the beginning, you told us each sort of what your role is and what that title means, but maybe Deirdre, to start us off, can you take us through, like, what does a day look like for you? What do you do all day?
Yeah, so lots of meetings. I often start my day early because we have a team in Stockholm. And so there's an 8 or 9 hour time difference depending on the time of the year. So often have 7 or 8 a.m. meetings so that we can spend some time with coworkers in Stockholm. And you know, what we do in the meetings, it varies. Part of my role is helping set strategy and vision for what we're doing with Minecraft in education and how we're making an impact in the world with Minecraft. So some of those meetings are planning, thinking, looking ahead to the future, also looking at what trade-offs do we need to make. So, you know, for example, when we realized back in March that schools were going to remote, we had a bunch of meetings to talk about what can we do? How can we support teachers and school leaders and students and families with the things we already have? And so lots of time talking about that. Another part of my job is supporting the team. So those might be coaching conversations or one-on-one meetings where we talk about people's priorities and what they're working on. So I might meet with Haro and say, you know, what are you working on? What's something that you're having a problem with? Or I have this new idea that came from another team and I'd love to get your feedback on it. So time spent coaching and, problem solving, troubleshooting, and then there's sort of the unexpected. And so I'm trying to think of, things that come in and surprise us. I just got a request from a Microsoft customer that would like to support schools and bring more Minecraft into schools in their country. So thinking about, are we set up to do that? Is that a priority for us? So lots of meetings. We've tried to, since COVID happened, my whole team has been working from home. And so we've tried to find ways to have a little bit of fun and social connection. So one thing that I do is I post in Teams every day a question of the day for the team to answer. And sometimes they're really silly. Today's question was, do you have a tried and true way of curing hiccups? And so it just provides some interesting and kind of fun insight into, people's family traditions or these, secret talents that they might have that they can share with the team. So it's a fun way for us to stay connected while we're working remotely. We've also done some virtual escape rooms and Jackbox games nights. And we have a weekly team lunch that's just open for anyone to grab some food and sit in front of their computer and chat. So work has definitely evolved. I used to travel a lot as well. And so that's been a big difference. And it's nice to have the extra time back that I used to spend on airplanes.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear about the efforts that you're making to sort of maintain community and like acknowledge that community has to look a little bit different in the workplace. We've talked to a couple other industry leaders and youth who are interested in like thinking about how do you take care of your team, how do you take care of your workers, how do you take care of yourself as a worker, as a learner, and just as a human during COVID when so much of our time is in front of a screen. So like finding ways to integrate that screen use into sort of the silly moments and like the getting to know you moments that feel a little bit lower stakes is really nice to hear. Hera, what's your day-to-day look like? I'm guessing some touch points with what Deirdre described, but also some sort of different activities.
Yeah, so Deirdre is thinking of kind of the strategy, like where we're going, what's her vision, what's the next step that we tackle. I'm more on the ground is what we like to say. And so my team is 8 developers and we are kind of coding what the client should look like and what our services should look like. So we take whatever we want to build and release for the next, normally it's about a quarter, for the next quarter. And we're fixing bugs and adding features to the game. I specifically spend a lot less time coding these days as a lead and a lot more time supporting my team. And so it's thinking about the same kinds of things Deirdre was saying, like how do I make sure that they're healthy? How do I make sure that they're not burning out? The boundaries between work and home have really shifted for people after COVID. Like it used to be, you left home and went to the office and that was your work time. And then you came back home and that was your personal time. But now it's your computer's right there, maybe in the living room, maybe in your bedroom. And you can just check it anytime. Oh, just let me check one more email. Let me check one more bug. Let me look at this one code review. And so trying to help people establish those boundaries as a lead, especially for the younger members of my team who are used to, like, I think as a student, you don't have a lot of those boundaries yet. And so you're used to just school all the time. That's kind of your life. And so trying to help them transition to, that's not how work should be. You should have time for yourself, time to relax, time to rest, and also making it normal for people to say, hey, I need a rest day today. I need a mental health day, and encouraging that. So some meetings, some time coding, although a lot less these days, a lot of times helping people in my team get unblocked. So if they tell me, hey, I don't know what to do, I'll, especially for the younger members, I'll spend time with them and debug. For the more experienced members, it's things like, I need help reaching out to this partner team. And so I'll say, yeah, cool, let me manage that. And you focus on kind of what you're working on right now.
Very cool. Yeah, it's a lot of problem solving, a lot of helping your team get unstuck, that kind of thing.
Definitely.
Very cool. And I feel like a lot of our viewers might have a sense of like broadly what Minecraft is and see the conceptual connection of how it could be helpful in the learning environment. But what does that actually mean? Like you're producing things, you're coding things. What is the point of connection with your teams and the universe of gaming and education? How does that all connect? Now I'll let you two decide who wants to take that one first.
So I can start. So Education Edition is built on top of a version of Minecraft called Bedrock. And there's kind of 2 main versions, the Java version and the Bedrock version. The Bedrock version runs on more platforms than the Java version. So it's the one on your Xbox, on your PlayStation, on your Switch. And that's what we decided to build on top of Education. So it is really just Minecraft, right? It's the same game with a little extra special sauce on top of it. And so we found like Minecraft just on its own is a great learning tool because it's a game where people can be as creative as they want. They can work together to solve problems, to build things. And so there's not a ton extra that you need to add there. Like kids are just already very engaged, very willing to work together to display those leadership skills, those creativity, problem solving skills. And so the things that we do for Education Edition is how do we take that a step further? And so a lot of the times it's catering to the teacher. Some teachers are not as experienced as a lot of the kids are with Minecraft. And how do we help them be more comfortable with the game? How do we make it as easy as possible? And so one example is a teacher might say, I love the idea of game-based learning. I think it's great, but I don't know how to use Minecraft. I don't know how to make a lesson. And so we'll say, yeah, that's great. Are you a third grade math teacher? We have a library in the game. You know, click on math, click on third grade, and there's 50 lessons. Pick one that you want to try, and it's that easy, right? And so those are the kinds of things that my team will add. And so we'll code, you know, the actual menu with the lessons and the part of the game that calls the service that stores the lessons and that downloads the lessons and that updates the lessons. So it's one small example of like a feature that we code specifically for Education Edition.
Very cool. And I have sort of a two-pronged question. One, I'm interested in the skills that Minecraft Education really like helps sharpen in the learners and maybe the instructors as well. And then later on, let's circle back to what are the skills that your team, each of your elements of the team really lean on to execute on that. But first, let's start with what are the skills that like Minecraft Education really sharpens in learners?
Yeah, I can start with that, and Hara would love to have you add on to it. So Minecraft's really started being used in classrooms just from kind of in a grassroots way, where teachers who were gamers, there were a couple specifically who saw Minecraft in alpha and thought, wow, this would be great in my classroom. This would be a good foundation for problem solving, for collaboration and working together, for creating simulations in every subject. So a simulation of a historic event or of a science experiment. So that's where Minecraft started, was just, you know, people who were playing the game, seeing the potential. It really evolved and developed from there. Often with a teacher bringing Minecraft in for a specific lesson or subject. And so maybe they're introducing students to how to multiply fractions, and they use the blocks in Minecraft to represent units of measure. So often they have a specific task in mind for bringing Minecraft in. What we've heard from teachers over the years and seen over and over is a lot of the skills that develop are actually outside of the mastery of that specific academic subject area. And so some of the key skills that we see are things like digital citizenship, which is the idea that, you know, we learn on the playground very early that if we push a friend, there are consequences. The person might fall down and get hurt. I might get in trouble. And so we sort of learn that behavior. It's not always as obvious in virtual or online environments. And so Minecraft is a great sort of virtual playground to learn about those lessons, both about consequences of your actions, but also about online safety and data privacy and sort of how to protect your information. Just the basics of how to navigate a virtual 3D environment. We're all, you know, so many of us just our work today is environments like Zoom calls where we're interacting in these virtual environments, and Minecraft's a great place to practice that in kind of early elementary education. There are also social emotional learning skills, so things like perseverance and self-regulation and learning to have patience. When we play games, sometimes it can get frustrating, but we know if we come back at it again, we're going to be a little bit better and we might be able to solve that puzzle or defeat the boss. And so those kind of skills of patience and self-regulation are really important in that kind of social emotional learning. There's also a group of skills in education that are often referred to as 21st century skills. And that includes things like communication and leadership and collaboration. And we also see these skills really develop and evolve in a Minecraft world. Some of that is because of the online and multiplayer environment that games are so known for. So just the, you know, that online interaction, but also because Minecraft's an open world and there's this sense of no rules that, you know, sort of creates an environment for individuals to be at their best. They're not being sort of pushed down into a box or constrained, but they have an open world to explore. So they have to we all have to learn to set boundaries and, decide what we want to focus on. And so it just provides a great environment for exploring and building on those skills. We have some specific lessons that we've built around things like social emotional learning. There's a lesson called the Mindful Night, and it's night with a K, like a medieval knight, that takes the player on a journey through some different activities that focus on breathing and, just some ways to calm and be aware of how you're reacting. We also have content that goes further into some of the 21st century skills and even into topics like social justice. So we have something called Lessons in Good Trouble that's focused on the teachings of US Congressman John Lewis. And it takes students through different social justice movements in history around this theme of good trouble. And sometimes we need to cause this good trouble in order to make a change in the world. So really focused on helping encourage conversations and exploration and develop those 21st century skills that we all need to have to be responsible citizens and also leaders in whatever path that we choose.
It's a lot more of like interpersonal skill building and like community and, like you said, citizenry skill building, in addition to, I was expecting like technical stuff, which maybe there's part of, but it's great that it like sort of spans way beyond that, because then
Yeah.
it sounds like it really does feel like a game and storytelling and all of the more like experiential things rather than like a math problem.
Yeah, well, and maybe Haro, you could talk about coding and chemistry, and because we do get into more technical sort of learning progression in specific areas as well.
Cool.
So it's funny to hear you say that, Jenny, because a lot of people ask me, oh, what do I need to be an awesome programmer? And I think they're expecting me to say like, oh, you need to be great at math or you need to be great at logic. And I think really what you need is you need to be great at community and you need to be great at perseverance, exactly those things that Deirdre was talking about, right? So programming is frustrating. You're solving problems that nobody has solved before. And so you're gonna hit a wall. And it's about how do you get yourself unstuck? How do you rely on your team? How do you communicate your problems? How do you do research to help figure out the next step? How do you take this big ambiguous problem and define it and scope it into that next step that you can take that's very well defined? And so it's not, can you solve the math problem, really? It's more of that like problem solving, perseverance, creativity. But yeah, so as Deirdre was saying, we also have in the game something called Code Builder. And I'm super excited about Code Builder. It's a way for you to code inside of Minecraft. And so we have this little robot mob called the agent. And so you can program him to do whatever you want. So he can build stuff for you or dig or plant. And it's, something that's hard about programming when you're learning is it's very abstract. And so when you're doing it in a computer, it's hard to really visualize what a program is doing. And so something that's neat about doing it in Minecraft is it's very, very obvious. And so if you have something that loops and adds a block in front of a block, in front of a block in a loop, you can see those blocks being placed. And so it really creates kind of that aha moment for students, especially younger students, and especially anybody who's a beginner programmer. So I think it's super cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. Visual learners. That would be helpful to me as well as a less young learner. Yeah, there was one other thing that you said that I thought was really helpful. Oh yeah, the perseverance, because I feel like workers and anyone who's attempting to learn in 2020, 2021 is getting some like impromptu training on perseverance, on problem solving, on getting unstuck, on taking care of yourself throughout. So I feel like that's a great reminder that most people who would be watching this actually have the starter pack of skills, right? Because they're practicing it just by going through school and work in 2021. So like you said, math is helpful, but not the only thing when it comes
Absolutely.
to this. So sort of taking it a layer up, each of you talked about how a lot of your day-to-day is focused on like teamwork, problem solving. And so beyond those two, are there other skills that you really feel like you lean on and like work to refine and strengthen and sharpen to really help you in each of your roles?
Yeah, I'd say for me, as a programmer, it's the problem solving. So it's being able to take a bug like, hey, there's people that when they open the Minecraft game, they can't connect to multiplayer. And so, taking that kind of really big statement and doing something with it and going, okay, what network are they on? What are they on an iPad? Are they on a Chromebook? Are they on a Windows machine? Can I get some information about their type of school network? Could I get some information about who they were trying to connect to? What's their account? So going through that process of, and you get it with experience of, once you solve enough problems in kind of as a programmer, you realize that you will always find a solution. It might take you time, it might take energy, it might take more people, but there is for sure a solution, and it's just a matter of getting to it, right? So not despairing is probably a really important skill, and knowing when to take a break. So a lot of times if I'm just like stuck and I can't get anywhere, I'll go for a walk. And it's, so much more helpful than people realize, just going for a walk. Sometimes I'll go for a walk and call a team member and say, hey, I stepped away from my computer and let's just talk through this problem. Like, what's going on? Do you have any ideas? And you get a lot done that way. So I'd say that's probably one of the most important skills you can have.
Yeah, and I think that specificity is helpful because I feel like so many people talk about like problem solving is an important skill, and like, of course, but what does that mean? So talking about like inheriting or getting like sort of a muddy, mushy problem from someone, and like that process specifically of drilling down into like what actions can we take and what do I need in order to take that action is really helpful to like sort of funnel it in to under the like broad umbrella of problem solving. What about you, Deirdre?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Jenny, you and Haro said. I'll also add prioritization, and this maybe seems obvious, but just like ruthlessly prioritizing what I'm working on and how I'm building in some of that like free time too. As Haro said, taking a walk, there's science that shows our brains react differently when we're moving through physical space. And so taking time to take breaks is so important to being really productive and really creative. So that's really important. I think the other skill that I'm always working on is the idea of growth mindset. And again, we see that in education. It's a concept that Microsoft has adopted. And it's this idea that having the mindset that we can learn and we can change and we can grow is really important to bring into everything. And so that means when you sort of like run into a wall, that you have the mindset to say like, okay, what have I learned from this? Instead of, why am I sitting here against this wall? And you have the sort of, the will to take a break, to look away from it, to ask other people for help and support is so important. It's, I really see it as a sign of strength and leadership when somebody is asking others for help or coming to me and asking for advice or just sharing a problem. And so I think bringing that kind of thought process into everything you do just helps you become stronger and better at what you're doing and more confident.
Yeah, definitely. I think asking for help and prioritizing, honestly, is sort of a different skill and a different challenge in a virtual world. To what you were saying earlier, Haro, like as a learner previously, like in the physical world, you'd have your classroom and then you'd leave the classroom, and there was just some cues that like your focus would be on X subject or, certain people. But now anyone who texts or anyone who emails or anyone who slacks is, at risk of pulling your attention away from what's in front of you. So to both of your points, practicing that muscle of prioritizing and giving yourself a break to help with that creativity are both really helpful insights. So we want to hear more about how you got to your role. And I feel like a lot of folks initially think about like previous roles and think about like higher ed, but we want to go back even farther than that. Because like I said, a lot of our listeners are in middle school and high school. So thinking all the way back to that area, were there any like activities or interests or classes that maybe you didn't realize at the time, but looking back, might have pointed you in the direction that you ended up going? And we've gotten some interesting answers from other industry leaders. Like we interviewed someone who is in charge of a manufacturing firm now, and he actually talked about like music because he really likes the rhythm of being on the manufacturing floor. So it can be stuff that there's a direct line, it can be stuff that's a squiggly line, but like what looking back were the connection points from your middle school and high school experiences and where you are now?
I can maybe start because my history goes back a bit further than our house. I kind of would like to say there was this defining moment. I think for me, where I am today is just the collection of a whole bunch of different experiences. When I look back at elementary school, I was among the generation that was first playing with Logo and the little Logo turtle. I remember distinctly trying to figure out how to draw a circle on a screen when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. And so I had early exposure to computers. My school was just outside of Boston, just early in bringing computers and computer science and coding into classrooms. And so I had that experience. I played a lot of video games as a kid too. I loved Super Mario Brothers. That was like every day after school, my best friend and I would come in and just try to beat Super Mario Brothers. That was the first game that I ever beat. I kind of probably high school, moved away from video games, came back a little bit in college. But there wasn't a clear path for me. My undergrad degree is in economics, and that was something I had a lot of AP courses when I got to college, and they said, okay, pick a major. And I said, no, I'm a freshman. And they said, no, pick a major. And so I majored in economics, and it was a great foundation for kind of, learning how to learn and approach problems creatively and solve problems. My career has taken me to sort of like accounting and finance and corporate strategy positions. And I came into Xbox and into gaming from the perspective of building a portfolio strategy and thinking about how we create experiences for all sorts of people beyond what we might 5 or 10 years ago traditionally have thought about gaming. So there's this idea of games like Halo and Call of Duty is sort of this like traditional gaming experiences. And we were at a point where we were looking at, but what about experiences that might be in the education realm or fitness related gaming experiences? It's kind of hard to think about it because today gaming is so broad and the audience of gamers is so broad. But at that point, when I came into gaming, that was still a little bit on the edge, and we were still, the industry was building games really for kind of 18 to 34-year-old males primarily. So I came into gaming that way, and when the opportunity came up to work on Minecraft and education, for me, that was sort of like all these different experiences coming together. And so as I said at the beginning, like the opportunity to take a passion for technology and seeing what kind of problems that technology can help solve, bringing that into education, which is just, an area that I feel like we can have so much impact and support teachers whose jobs are really hard and support students who maybe aren't traditional learners and like the typical learning is really hard for them. And then to have the really fun aspect of gaming into it, like just sort of all these different experiences really aligned for me. I think some of the things that have been consistent through that have been a focus on solving problems. And I'm kind of naturally really good at diagnosing things, which can be a blessing and a curse. I can sort of see a bunch of things wrong with it. And so something that has been helpful for me in my career is to put that superpower into how do we solve these problems? How do we bring together groups of really smart people and clever solutions and sometimes unexpected solutions to solve those kind of problems?
It's heartening to hear you talk about how like it wasn't one moment, because that journey does vary so much. Like we've talked to industry leaders where it was like one class or one teacher or one like internship that just like made the dots connect for them. So it's a helpful reminder that like sometimes it's not, sometimes it's sort of the constellation of moments, and sometimes it's the thing that you go home and enjoy to do and don't think is a job, when you're a kid, but that by the time you're looking for a job might be. So that's sort of a great arc that you like sort of paved with us, Deirdre. What about you, Harold?
So there's one kind of obvious moment. The one obvious moment is, so I grew up in Mexico, and in Mexican high school, your senior year, you have to pick a specialty. And it's because when you go to college, you can't switch majors. If you want to switch majors, you have to start over. And so they try in high school really hard to get you to pick something and stick to it. And so as part of that, the specialized area that I chose was the physics math area, for no real reason other than I liked math and I liked physics. And I didn't know any bio, and the lit area seemed scary. So I thought, yeah, why not? As part of the physics math area, one of the classes was programming. And so, I mean, I'd heard about programming. I grew up with games. I'm a big gamer. I think the first game I played, I was 2 or 3. And it was this strange Korean game about a penguin sliding and you had to like evade ice blocks. I couldn't even find it now. But so I've played games my whole life. And we went into this programming class, which I hadn't really thought about programming before that as a career. And the teacher told us, okay, you're going to write this one line of code in Java. And it's going to print a message to the screen. And the message was Hola Mundo, so hello world, but in Spanish, because I was in Mexico. And so I remember I wrote down the line, I ran it, and it did. It showed this window and it said hello world. And that was magical that I told the computer to do something and it did it. And it just really got me hooked because I remember thinking like, oh, I've always been a really creative person, but I'm really clumsy. And so I can't make stuff. Like I'm not good at art. I'm not good at sculpture. I'm not really good at building because the things I touch fall over. But this means I can make stuff digitally and I don't have to use my hands. I can just type. And so it was this huge kind of eye-opening moment of there's this whole other world where if I just if I know the right lines of code, I can make anything. And that was crazy. It was really, really cool. And so from that, I'd said, oh, I absolutely have to study computer science. Like that's the thing I have to go to college for. Something that's cool about computer science in college is you can get internships. And so lots of companies will go to colleges to recruit students. I got my first internship at Microsoft as a freshman. So I'd been in college 2 weeks, I think, when the career fair happened. And I remember our CS 101 teacher was like, you should all go to the career fair. And I remember thinking, I know nothing. I've been in college 2 weeks. What company could possibly hire me? And she said, I know you're probably thinking you know nothing, which I thought was a weird, like, oh wow, she can read my mind. Weird. She said, but it's a good experience for you. It's good practice. Like no pressure if you don't get an internship. It's your first year. So I went. And I remember talking to a lot of companies that were like, oh, you're a little young, could like come back next year. But the Microsoft recruiter was really nice. And I was so nervous by the time I got to Microsoft because I'd been kind of rejected the whole day. So I was literally shaking and I handed him my resume, which had one line that said like CS 101 course. It was something like that, right? And he said, are you excited about technology? And I said, I am so excited about technology. Yes, absolutely. He said, okay, well, let's get you an interview then. And so I got that internship here for the mail server system that we have, so Exchange. And I recommend every student get an internship. It's such an eye-opening experience. You get to see what it's like to be a real software developer. You get to meet with such smart people, such kind people who are very willing to help you. And it was also this like, wow, Microsoft kind of works on everything. Because then I came back and did a different internship in Windows Phone, which is totally different from the mail server. And then, I don't know, from that, I just thought like, this is a cool company and they work on so many different things. And this is where I want to start at least. And so I've been here ever since, working on all sorts of different teams. Like I went to Xbox late, but before Xbox, I was on Cortana, which is the voice assistant. And I worked on Safety Platform, which was anti-phishing and anti-malware. And then in Xbox, I first worked in game services for multiplayer services for different types of games like Halo and they're all blanking now. Forza and Rainbow Six is our popular one. And one of the things that I missed as a programmer was kind of my other passion, and it was teaching. Like I remember, I have a younger brother, and I remember when I was 6 or 7 and he was 2 or 3, and I would sit him down and give him a little notebook and say, okay, we're going to play teacher now. And so I would teach him whatever I was learning in school. And that's been true kind of throughout. Like I love school and I love learning and I love teaching. And I love when students have that like aha moment of like, oh, I get it. And I love it even more when they think they're not going to get it. And then they do. And they're like, oh, I actually am able to do this like that. I live for that. And so when I was a programmer, I loved the creative aspect and the problem solving aspect, but I miss teaching so much. And so Microsoft has this cool program called TEALS, where programmers can go to local high schools and help teach computer science. And so I signed up for that. And one of the leads in my team, Jeff, was also a TEALS volunteer. And so years later, he reached out and said, hey, are you still into education? Because I'm in this team called Minecraft Education Edition, and I think it might be a good fit for you. And I quit that day. I said, yes, please. Like, where do I sign? And so, yeah, this team is just kind of that marriage of like my passion for education and teaching and helping make school better for everybody. Because I had such a good school experience. I want everybody to have a good school experience. And, you know, the problem solving, the creativity, the being able to code, being able to have such giant impact is another really cool thing about code. Like you write one line of code and then it goes to people around the world. Like that's kind of crazy. That's a power that software has. So anyway, long story of how I got to where I am.
Great story, and I feel like the two of your stories are great combos because it's an example of the power of an aha moment and like what that motivates, and the power of those constellation of moments that individually might not feel like a big aha, but add up to leading a team that inspires the kind of energy that Haro just communicated. So two different paths, but equally important for sure. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that. I want to talk a little bit more about challenges and sort of the favorite aspects of your current roles. And Harry, you touched on this a little bit, the beauty of like connecting teaching and coding and all of that. But the reality is also that even at the best job, even with a rock star team, things aren't perfect. And it's a helpful muscle for workers and learners to sort of exercise, to sort of acknowledge the challenges and problem solve like we were talking about earlier. So can you tell us about an example of that, of like, you know, maybe it's related to working remotely, maybe it's working to having a big team that you can't see in person or something like that, but a couple of challenges that you work through and sort of strategies to work through them in your day-to-day.
Yeah, one that is near and dear to me and recent is, so I became a lead about a year ago. And so that switch from being just a programmer, you're really kind of focused on yourself, to becoming a lead and being focused on your team felt very overwhelming. It was suddenly like, I felt like, oh, I should still program the same way I was before. But I have these 8 people who need things and they have questions and they have needs. And oh, this partner team has an urgent email in my inbox, and oh, the service just fell down. And it was this like, what do I do next? Kind of this freeze, you know, I froze. It was like, I don't know what to do. So it was like, okay, I need to calm down. I need to do the mindful night lesson and go, what's the most important thing? The most important thing is the service. I can tell my team to wait an hour while I figure out the service. I can answer that email and say, hey, I will get back to you tonight. I can, you know, so it's, I think it's something you need in probably any industry. And Deirdre talked about it earlier. But it's when you feel overwhelmed, how to pause and how to decide, okay, what's the urgent thing that you need to do today? Is something that's challenging for me right now still.
Yeah, I think I appreciate you saying that because it definitely does span industries, and I think it probably spans roles and ages and sort of worker and learner as well. That like we have competing priorities; they all seem to stack up inevitably at some point. So having sort of the presence of mind to step back and take that breath and think about one, what's most important, and the second element of that is like, what can I do? Like, what can I take action on, and use that as a starting point, and then sort of circling back to something that I forget one of you said earlier was also like reaching out for help, like reaching out to teammates, whether that's classmates in your classroom, teammates on the State of Innovation Challenge team, or maybe an instructor or mentor, that is not a weakness, but in fact a sign of strength. What about you, Deirdre? Any challenges that you've been strategizing?
Yeah, you know, we've talked about lots of fun stuff, and it is, you know, we work in a really fun and challenging space and have a really great team, but it is hard. You know, I think there's, in typical time, we have to decide which things we're going to work on. You know, it can be so tempting to want to take everything on. We generally will visit classrooms when it's safe to do that, and I've really taken an approach of bringing the whole team. We used an approach called design thinking when we first envisioned what Minecraft education could be. And design thinking involves interviewing your customers or clients, or the people who are going to use the software in this case. And so we spent time meeting with teachers in classrooms and observing them and interviewing them about what they do and what problems they have to solve. We sat on the floor with elementary school students to, you know, participate in a class that they were doing. And so we've taken this very like hands-on approach to inform what we're doing. So it's hard not to be able to do that right now and not to have that same kind of exposure to what we're working on. It's also challenging to just like not see the people we work with every day. There's certain cues that you pick up on when you're in an office environment or just, with friends and family where someone might be a little bit down, and it's something that you might notice some of those subtle cues if you're in person. And it's not as obvious, or we might be reading into whether or not somebody has their camera on. Maybe they just woke up late. Maybe they just didn't feel like turning their camera on, or maybe they're going through something related to work or related to something in their personal life. And so it's hard not to, just not to have some of those cues. And so it requires extra effort to check in. And I think that's something important, again, in sort of typical times when we're together, but even more so now, of checking in with the person and not just on the project or the status. And so trying to reinforce that behavior of, before we jump into, okay, is this going to ship on time, or what's the status of this bug, of how are you doing, and setting aside some time for that and making a commitment to that. Because there's a lot going on. Like there's life, there's the pandemic, there's racial inequity, there's, just the stresses of work from home. A lot of people have kids at home too. And so there's a lot. And it's, I find it's important to check in. It's also important to prioritize, knowing when we ourselves are not okay and need that time and sort of need someone to check in with us. So it's a lot to balance right now.
Yeah. And I think like that's yet another example of something that I think a lot of our challenge participants and youth and the instructors that are partnering with them are probably getting a lot of practice in, because same with lesson plans, ready to jump in, same with any big group Zoom, honestly, ready to jump in and try to navigate the logistics, but looking for those opportunities to actually check in with a human as a human, and also acknowledging that it is harder because those cues are different virtually than in person. So let's talk about the cases. So as you two know, we have 3 different cases driving the State of Innovation Challenge. One is focused on like food supply chain. The second is focused on responding to COVID, which is everything from testing protocols to staying as mentally healthy as you can during COVID, to working remotely. And the third is life after COVID. So how do we rebuild a better next step rather than going back to what normal was? And I feel like based on what you two are describing, you're doing a lot of work in the responding to COVID and life after COVID. And I feel like when someone thinks like essential worker or responding to COVID, they're probably, maybe Minecraft isn't the first thing that comes to mind, but I think the opportunity to like have some fun and to like learn while having fun, and the folks who are fueling that experience are absolutely contributing to part of the COVID response and part of life after COVID. So as our youth are thinking about their own solutions, they're thinking about, based on what they're experiencing in 2021, what do I want to see in my world, either in the efforts to respond to COVID or life after COVID. And that can lead to some really creative and also maybe a little bit daunting solutions of like, I want this big thing, but how do I write something? And they can do like a Flipgrid video, they can do a write-up, there's a bunch of different ways they can package it. But leaning on the skills that you two were describing earlier, taking those like big statements and like channeling it down to something actionable. What types of advice would you have for students as they're thinking about the challenge? And you can go any direction you want with this, but just in that universe, what advice would you have?
I can maybe start and throw out some ideas. I love innovation and different approaches to innovation. So I mentioned design thinking as an approach that we took with Minecraft Education Edition. And I just like, for me and for our team, it's been so powerful to help get to kind of the root of the actual problem that you're working on. So there's lots of free online resources for design thinking. The Stanford D School has some great online resources and YouTube videos. So that could be something for inspiration. There are other exercises like the 5 whys, where you take a problem and why, and answer that and why. And even doing an exercise like that independently and just, writing it down, jotting it down on your phone can help provide some insights that just put you in a surprising direction. Also there's, some kind of fun creativity exercises. I like to try to inject some of those when we're in person. We do an exercise where we have everyone throw up their hands and say ta-da, just to practice being a little bit silly. And then we go through an exercise where we do just like a fun little challenge. And when you make a mistake, you and your partner throw up your hands and say ta-da. So you're like learning that failure is okay, and we can celebrate that and be silly and have fun with it. So I think that combination of looking at sort of like approaches to innovation that have been researched and studied and practiced can give you some good clues. And then, also taking that approach of, have fun with it and be curious and be creative. Another approach to innovation is looking for like necessities and incongruities. So things that like kind of don't make sense, and taking an approach of like what has to be true for this to work. So something like that we face today in COVID of restaurants need to have extra space between the tables, or in some cases only outdoor dining. But in order for restaurants to survive, they need to have a lot of customers. But the requirements today require they can't have as many customers. So taking that incongruity and that, like, how do we solve that? Like, these things seem to be totally in opposition. Is there something that makes both of those true? And so, it kind of goes along that path of what are the 5 whys, having the empathy for the situation. How do I take something that seems to be inherently in conflict and create a solution that solves for both of those?
So I want to jump in because Deirdre reminded me, one of the things that she does for the team, which I really love, is we go on, well, before, pre-COVID, we go on offsites, which is where you take everybody out of the office to a different space and just be creative. And so one of the ones that we did 2 years ago, it must have been now, was you were given a prompt. And so the prompt that my team was given, for example, was the teacher experience using Minecraft education. And you do something called the 11-star experience. And so it's, okay, well, what's kind of the first star experience is like the minimum we should do. Well, at minimum, teachers should probably be able to open Minecraft, something like that. And the 5-star is like, oh, well, they should be able to open Minecraft, and they should be able to talk to their students, and they should be able to tell their students what to do next. And, way summarizing what we did. And then you keep going, okay, what's the 6-star? What's the 7-star? What's the 8-star? And so thinking about that problem that Deirdre was saying, like, look around you, what are some things that needs some more thinking right now? And going through that process of, okay, what's the minimum? Like, what if I could make that better? What if I could make that better? What if I could make that better? One example that I think is really applicable to students right now is, not everybody has the same access to internet and devices at home. And so I think schools are doing the best they can to provide equitable education to everybody, but the reality of that is, it's not the case. And so when people come back to school, how do we help students that had less access catch up? Maybe it's that you have a portal with all of the homework and you star the ones that are super important and you mark some as optional so that they can catch up a little faster. Okay, let's start there. Well, how can we make that even better? Oh, maybe you partner them with a student that did have more access and then you do the homework together. Okay, what's the next step after that? And so that's one kind of another really creative way to get to a good place. The other one that we did as part of that is called Yes and. And so when you have a team of people, you build on what each other is saying, and you have to say yes and, because it helps you like get into that space of building on each other. So somebody says, okay, I think that teachers should be able to launch the world and get into where their students are. Yes, and they should be able to take their students and see where they are in the progress of the lesson. Yes, and they should be able, and so the yes and the 11-star are really, really helpful processes for brainstorming, I think.
Yeah, those are great strategies too. Because again, I feel like on a lot of our conversations, we have like these sort of big, broad picture pieces of advice of things like problem solving, things like thinking creatively, but sharing the actual strategies, like actual activities that your team is using to like bring that to life is really helpful. Because I feel like a lot of challenge participants would be like, yeah, I'd love to be creative, but especially in a year like 2021, where sometimes things feel a little foggy, having some guidance on like, here's literally how you can get started is really helpful and can help you get unstuck. So maybe to wrap us up, I want to talk about sort of resources and recommendations. So Deirdre, I know you already sent us some links to Minecraft Education's website, and we have those posted on the State of Innovation website. Are there any elements of your website or any other resources that you would recommend students look at as they're navigating the challenge, and or if they're thinking about exploring career pathways similar to the two of yours?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One, you mentioned sort of like creating some of the output using things like Flipgrid. Minecraft can be a great way to present ideas out. We've had some students that just independently, even if their schools aren't using Minecraft Education Edition, use that as a tool to like summarize and provide a sort of final presentation activity. So Minecraft can be a great environment for that, that multiple people in a group can work together in, and you can tell a great story, and it's, can be very customized. You can record with narration. You can actually use Flipgrid to record with narration. So it can be a nice tool for reporting out. There's also for the, sort of pre and post COVID, we've got our blog is maybe a good place to look at some of the themes and trends that we've focused on in the last year, because we've been really connected with the education community and, addressing topics like, how do we quickly get teachers the experience and competence they need to run Minecraft in their classroom? Or, how do we support virtual science fairs? Like, what does that even look like when suddenly you're not in a lab and it's you don't have the same sort of resources to do a science project? So I think between just generally thinking about Minecraft as a tool for collaborating and communicating and reporting out, or even iterating in the design thinking approach, one of the steps is doing like quick prototyping, and so that can be a place where you can do that to test out some ideas, all the way through looking at some of the topics and subject areas that we focused on.
Awesome.
I would add to that. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'd add to that the Microsoft blog as well, if you're looking kind of beyond Minecraft education in Minecraft. So like one that I find fascinating is the Microsoft vaccine platform. So like distributing the vaccine to the people that need it the most in the most efficient way is a hard problem. There's lots of parameters. It needs to be stored in a particular way. Only certain types of trucks can transport it. Different states have different levels of populations that need. The distribution centers are in particular locations. There's now 4, I think, or 3 different types of vaccines. How do you manage that? How do you visualize it? How do you tell if you're making good progress? How do you help people schedule appointments? How do you make sure that those appointments are spaced out? Fascinating logistical problem, and software can help, right? Anytime you have a big logistical problem like that. So that's a really interesting one if you're looking for inspiration. Another kind of less commonly talked about one that I also find fascinating is something called fraud protection. And so an example is during COVID, the government has these stimulus checks for people that are in extra need. But at any time there's an online transaction that has to do with money, there are bad actors that are trying to take that money. Maybe they make fake accounts. Maybe they try to take the transaction in the middle. And so how do you prevent that? So Microsoft has a system called Dynamics Fraud Protection. My husband actually works on it. So that's how I know about it. But it uses machine learning to figure out, like, is the person signing up for this account legit? Are they really the person that they say that they are? And do they really need the check right now? Or are they, trying to pretend? And so being able to make that decision instantly, because the people that do need help need it immediately. So you don't want to send it to a committee that takes 2 weeks to review it and gets it back to you. But you also, want it to be thorough. You don't want to send it to people that don't need the help. And so how software can help you find patterns and identify, like, this pattern is not a normal pattern. So this person, there's something shifty about this account. Let's block it and put it for review. Is also like a really interesting use of technology.
Very cool. Those are all like really interesting and cool suggestions. We've covered a lot. We've talked about each of your roles. We've talked about your career path to those roles, the things that most excite you about your job, the things that are challenging, even though you really love your job. And then we've also gotten some great advice, both on how to approach data innovation case challenges, and just some advice on exploring careers and getting to know Microsoft and Minecraft and sort of the intersection of education and gaming overall. So I think we're going to wrap up, but thank you both so much for taking time out to talk to us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.
Good luck with your projects, everyone. Thanks, Jenny.
Of course. Bye.
Bye-bye.